Joining us on the program right now, somebody who knows Coach Alex Jensen very well, somebody who knows this Utah program during the time that everybody's hearkening back to all these days, JJ. He's Tim LaComb. Of course, you hear him on the pre-half and post right here for the Utah Jazz. And, you know, Tim, first of all, you saw the news. Obviously, this is one of your buddies, but on top of it, Utah needed a change, and not only did they get it, they ripped that Band-Aid off, and they made a Hail Mary call to one of their best, and it just seems like an awesome time to bring Alex Jensen back to Utah.
Yes, totally agree. Feel like what you guys said. I think it's the key reason right now. The basketball program has definitely lost. There's been a lot of lost interest, and they want to try to figure out a way to get that thing rocking like it was during Alex's time and beyond. And I think that's really what, at the end of the day, I think the excitement that this will create with people that will then in kind of support the program. Hopefully for Alex's, in Alex's situation, it'll go good for him.
Well, Tim, you were part of that program during those great years under Majerus, and you've also been on the other side coaching against it. You know the glory that program has had and the struggles. What has been missing there, and what does Alex Jensen bring that can change that?
I've often said that, hype and success, even though, hype and success have killed many a career because it is so hard to live up to the expectations. And I think that that's really what Utah's trying to do, is get back. Like you said, Ray Jack took them to a Sweet 16. Larry did the same. So it's not like success has been vacant, but it's just been that the bottom outs have been, more noticeable, when in the past Rick was able to, kind of just, his run here is really kind of beyond compare. And so that's what everybody does, is compare it to the next guy gets compared to it. I don't know, if Utah can ever get necessarily back to that same kind of dominance, but to bring people in that, and in this case, Alex, and bring people in that saw that place when it was rocking, understood what it is, plays to that legacy. I think that's really smart.
Tim, I think that what's interesting during all this is people go, yeah, but he had success in the NBA. This is a very different game in the college game these days. And I thought, there's no better time to be able to say that what you're doing in the pros in terms of managing locker rooms, in terms of being able to be somebody who is managing these guys who are not just playing for you, but getting paid at the same time, and you're recruiting among all those things. And obviously it helps to see the success that Kevin Young's had down at BYU, because then people go, oh, no, that could work. Why is it something that right now could work even more than it used to in the past? A guy going from lead assistant in the NBA to head coach at the collegiate level.
Well, I think the whole NIL changed the game. The fact that rather than, recruiting in theory, and I'll do that in theory, you can't see me making air quotes, but recruiting in theory was relationship based, and I still believe there's relationships acquired, because you got to be able to know what kind of person you're going to coach and be coached by. But beyond that, it's really become like recruiting has become speed dating, and it's like who has the best job, and it's just out and out talked about. Young guys that are playing at maybe a mid-major and have great years. I mean, the reality is that is a new pool that then you can use money to go acquire those guys. So because it's become more transactional, less relationship based, I think, it trends toward the NBA. And the one thing I will tell you about NBA coaches watching it night in and night out, some bet more than others, but they all know ball and they all know how to get a bucket. But I think beyond that, it's high level business now to run one of these organizations, and the fact that they're hand in hand with the head coach's assistants, kind of keeping everything afloat. You certainly learned a lot of things along the way.
You've been up, you know Alex well, both, from the time in the past, and also you watched him closely as he was an assistant with the Utah Jazz and the Dallas Mavericks. What qualities does he have that will allow him or will give him the opportunity to be successful as a head coach at Utah?
Well, I think his intellect, his intellect was always impressive. And I was at Utah when he came as a freshman, and I just remember how aghast, I guess is the word, Majerus was with how much he knew about the game. He constantly was like, "You're a high school coach, he must have just been,
I forgot. Your Majerus is perfect. Hold on, keep going, but it has to be in this voice.
Yeah. So, but and he used to tell Al, there was one part in practice one day where he's like, guys, I got a crush on Al, a man crush on Al. I mean, if he was a woman, I'd marry him. It was after a film session where Al was like 100% technically, sound during the film. So he's always been cerebral and always been intellectual. He's approached the game that way. I think he's a guy who came to Utah with an unbelievably great reputation, but beyond, did what I think anybody thought he'd do, being player of the year in the league. So with that intellect is a heck of a lot of grit. And in this day and age, sport always, but this day and age, you got to have a ton of grit because there's ups and downs. There's a million variables. And so I think his time, getting prepared and all the jobs he's done, his Majerus is assistant at St. Louis, and so dude's paid his dues, learned the game really, really well. And, he was a G League. When he had an opportunity to be a head coach, he was the G League head coach of the year.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's any doubt the dude can coach.
One thing that we've watched during this whole process is, everybody was kind of hoping that this would be, a hire that could be made. Is there part of this where, you look at it and you say, this thing is set up perfectly? We were wondering when we were all shocked when Craig Smith, I think, got let go when he did. But at the same time, don't you think that was one of those things where the University of Utah said, hey, we're gonna make people realize right now with this move, paying out a guy, letting him go during a year that he was frankly overperforming compared to what the expectations were for the rest of the league, but not the expectations of what this basketball program expects and what now this athletic director and this athletic department is hoping for this basketball program to come back to.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. The fact that the Huntsman Center's got curtains down, in the upper bowl is just, and even then it's really difficult to get people to come. I mean, I do believe like that's not all on Craig, nor is it all on Larry or all on Ray. I mean, at a certain point, I think there's got to be some look into what really are the factors, and I would assume that in Al's negotiations, NIL was number one. What am I going to have guaranteed every year? And I can tell you that has not been the case. I mean, it's been a fight to try to get revenue, to get enough money to pay guys. And so obviously you see the landscape out there right now. NBA guys are getting involved in putting teams together. So there's a ton of money in it. And, Utah with Alex coming, I think that signals too that will change.
What would you think about Andre Miller joining his staff as an assistant?
Oh, I'd be ecstatic. Andre and I have stayed in touch all these years. I never forget, I walked into a gym in Arizona, and you lose track of time doing the coaching because it's the same thing. It's like doing radio. You show up and do the same thing every day for 12 years, and then all of a sudden you look back and go, wow, that was 12 years. And so anyway, I walked in. And Andre, I looked up to the top of the student where the parents sat, and I saw this dude at the top that looked a lot like Andre with a video camera. And he was filming his kid playing, and I was like, dude, have I come that far? Andre's watching his kid play. When Andre came in, I mean, he was a kid when he came in. He was barely past graduated. He had to sit out his first year. But that's the Andre I got to meet, was that young kid. And so it was just wild to see how much time's passed. But to your question, get to it quicker, I would expect that will be a huge push from Al. I learned, that both those guys interviewed. And so I don't know. Sometimes, you don't get the ultimate job, and maybe it's not necessarily better than the job you got. So I think there'll be some recruiting involved for sure, but those conversations probably will happen. And my hope is, I think that's one way to renew crazy interest in Utes again, is have Andre and Al kind of running the thing together.
You know, a lot of Utah fans long for the days of Majerus and the success. I think it's more about the success than just Majerus. But you worked with Rick Majerus, and you saw the good and the bad. But what are some of the things that Majerus taught that actually would work in 2025 or still apply to the game in 2025 that Alex can bring with him, that he still probably carries with him, that can help him in this process of getting this program up off the ground?
Well, it's kind of who Alex is anyway, because he kind of learned those things as well. But I would say number one is, an absolute despise losing. More. You want to win, but you hate losing more than anything. You got to kind of have that approach, and I think that was something Rick certainly was, and I think that's what Al is. I think the ultimate thing is the way Coach Majerus prepared his teams to play. I promise you, night after night after night, our guys knew their offense better than they did. We would have guys that come back to the huddle and joke, "Hey, I had to tell that dude to go to the corner on thumb 5 or whatever." Because that's just how Rick was. He left no stone unturned. There was no guesswork. Everything was totally 100% defined. And roles were defined, very, very bluntly, but they were defined. And the way that the guys were going to play the game as a team was really defined. So I think those things would be the things that would still apply today. And then I'll never forget, and this has to relate to Al too, I played basketball growing up my whole life. And, you would, talking out on the court was encouraged, but it was more like, hey, batter type of thing, where you're not necessarily – when I got to Utah and Majerus, put on a clinic one of the very first days for the young guys about communication. And it floored me how far ahead of the game he was, because, you got to have full-on conversations on defense, and guys don't quite get it. And they, but Majerus was so far before his time, because if you can communicate better out there in chaos, and that's what the game is, if you can communicate in chaos, then you can certainly deal, together you can get through anything. And I think BYU showed that the other night. Communication's a huge part of the game. And I think that Al's approach to defense will be similar.
Tim LaComb, pre-half and post games. You can hear him right here on DKSL Sports Zone, the radio home of the Utah Jazz. And, of course, breaking down the hire of Alex Jensen coming back to the University of Utah. Tim, we love having the insights, man, and we love the Coach Majerus impersonations, because I forget how many hours that you've spent with that man, and the stories are awesome. And I think that Alex bringing back the success part of the Rick Majerus years is going to be awesome. So thanks for hanging out with us on the program here. Good luck on the call tomorrow, and we're looking forward to the rest of the season, what it brings for this Utah Jazz team as well.
Great. Thanks for having me on, guys. I really appreciate it, and I'm super, super happy for Alex Jensen and his family.
Awesome.
There you go.
Thanks, Coach.
Tim LaComb. I want to say you're not injured when you're doing a radio thing, unless you got like laryngitis or something. But Tim did that interview on like single-digit charge on the cell phone.
That was clutch.
He got through the whole thing. I don't know if it was divine intervention that got us to get the phone to. I think it was at 1% for the last 5 minutes.
Well, we're just lucky it wasn't an iPhone 8.